Hi everybody, welcome to Readers of the Lost Art, and I think it's being parasitically streamed to these other channels. So do you two ne'er-do-wells want to introduce yourselves?
Yes, let's introduce ourselves. Hi, I'm Stuart. My channel is Digital Aporia, and I also help Paul out with some stuff on his channel, specifically the Proust videos.
When you say help out, you're the channel gimp.
I'm the channel gimp officially.
You love saying that, don't you?
I do.
Every
I
week,
love being the gimp.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm James Cox. I run Cox's Making Videos, which is more on the side of talking nonsense about the media and Hollywood and stuff like that. And I'm currently reeling from a load of Hogwarts and Harry Potter fans because I may have accidentally pissed all of them off by saying that it's not going to be that good. That's all I said, pretty much.
How many of those films have there been?
I think there's been 8, isn't there?
And
now
you could have annoyed them even more by just saying they're all rubbish, and any adults who watch them should go and get checked out.
Yeah, well, I did have a bit of an argument with someone in the comments because I was like, isn't this supposed to be for kids? And he was like, what kind of Harry Potter are you watching? And I was like, well, I haven't since I was like 12.
No, it's the decline and fall of the West. It's people start watching Harry Potter.
It's just reminding me, Paul. You know, we were talking about Viz the other day, the Viz comic. I'm sure Viz once did a strip called Harry Potter, and it was a guy running around trying to get bombed. I'm not joking. I'm sure I've got that issue somewhere.
Can they give a shout out to Incontinent Jay in Texas? He even changed his name after our last live stream.
Hey Jay, how are you doing, man?
And he is the only person watching live at the moment. Well, not watching, but commenting. So, hello, Incontinent Jay. Do you like what he's done to his avatar?
What has he done?
It's a Duchamp urinal.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Very nice.
Nice.
Right, well, if I could set this up, because you two will just distract me.
Sorry.
The reason for doing this was that when I first met Stuart, I was actually his caseworker. He'd been an incel for about 10 years, I think it was. So he wanted to do something on incels. And we asked James, because Stuart and I agreed that it would be quite interesting, since he has a unique perspective. Well, not unique, but he has an interesting perspective because he's been married to a ladyboy for quite a while now. So he has a complex gendered perspective on the whole issue. So, Stuart, I remember you saying something like, this could be a really good video if we framed it correctly.
Yes.
So would you now like to frame it correctly?
So that's very hard. So I think we talked about this one previously, that we were saying how that it wouldn't be a good idea to do it because it's supposedly this controversial essay. But then I did a bit of researching and found out that this Schopenhauer, specifically his essay on women, but Schopenhauer's philosophy as a whole, is one of the kind of the key, I guess, like wellsprings of the manosphere, which I think you did recently, Paul. You did a video about Andrew Tate, and you've done stuff on manosphere before. So yeah, I read the essay, and I didn't particularly find it controversial. I found it a lot to talk about, and some really fun. No, seriously, you have to be careful. I have to be careful here. But yeah, seriously, I think
it's difficult to prove a negative. But what didn't you find controversial?
What didn't I find
we'll
controversial?
Go through it shortly.
Yeah,
when he basically talks about short-legged, ugly-ass part of the species, you thought that was perfectly fair, did you?
No, that's the bit I do take issue with, and I think we'll talk about how the essay as a whole, it kind of inverts his own philosophy, and actually, I guess it doesn't do a particularly good service to his whole philosophical project. I think if you read Schopenhauer and Will and Representation, and then read this essay, you could say, but in this essay, he's negating what he's saying in his masterwork. But there's certain elements of the essay that I think have been misconstrued by manosphere culture. It's been misconstrued by incel culture. I think there's definitely been kind of a selective representation of the essay to justify pre-existing points in the manosphere and kind of to bolster grievances. But when you strip away some of the kind of the more controversial kind of the time things that Schopenhauer says, there is quite a deep, meaty, kind of chunky things that you can get hold of and really talk about that kind of really, I guess, pressure tests Schopenhauer's philosophy.
What's your preferred appellation in this context? Ex-incel, recovering incel? Do you have one?
I don't have one, no. I mean, just to clarify, I've never been an incel. No, never will be an incel. But I think
That's
it's
what they
very...
all say, though.
That's what they'll say. I think it's very dangerous and unfair to simply write off incel culture and to write off the manosphere, because I think there are some genuine grievances and some genuine issues there that say something about modern society that we need to look at kind of through a therapeutic lens. So I think, Paul, you know me, I always try and kind of find a middle ground with stuff. I'm very apolitical. I don't take any positions on things. I think for me, looking for the root of the question without actually answering the question, so to speak, is quite fruitful. So I'm hoping we're going to do that today and have a bit of a laugh at the same time.
Yeah, James and I will try and stop you. James, what was your initial perspective in your Ebola-addled mind when you read it?
Well,
because you read it, didn't you? Had some ideas, then contracted Ebola, forgot what your ideas were, didn't write them down because you're that generation that doesn't write anything down anymore.
Well, I fell asleep. That was the main one. That's why I fell asleep. But,
just nodded off.
Yeah, pretty much. No, I read it and I thought, I mean, I'd try and put it in a way that is a shorter way than when Stu quite eloquently put together an argument there. Basically, I thought he would make Bernard Manning proud. And
right, is that a critique or is
not
that an endorsement?
Not necessarily. I think, to be honest with you, like Stu said, it's clearly of a time, and it's clearly something that, if you said that to the right person, they'd be extremely offended by it, and another person would just be like, yeah, it is what it is. Speaking as a working class lout that I am, the only thing that kind of really spoke out to me is that you can kind of see, I'm sure we'll unpick it a little bit more as we go on, but you can kind of see how I'm going to teeter on the edge and pull myself back there, because I think I was going to basically get divorced after I was about to say something. So let's just move on.
What is the divorce rate amongst ladyboys and straight men?
It's actually quite low.
Is it?
Yeah. My missus would absolutely kill me if I just carry on with that joke. But yeah, fine. Let's keep it going.
Mrs. inverted commas. I'm Stuart's known me for years now, and he knows I was one of the first arch male feminists.
Right.
So, I speak with quite a lot of authority on these issues.
Yeah, definitely trendsetter.
So what did someone say in the comments about strong opinions are cringe, stand in the middle ground? Melon
Sit on the fence.
Melon Seeds, you've obviously not met me before. Do you want to put up the whatever you wanted to show, Stuart?
I don't think we're ready to show that just yet, Paul.
Aren't we? Why not? Pray tell.
Innuendo, swiftly moving on. Yeah, I think it's quite important to define the manosphere and kind of what we're talking about when we talk about incels before we move on to Schopenhauer. So very quickly, Paul, I know you're a card-carrying member of the manosphere, so maybe you might be able to give your...
I used you as the example of an incel. I thought that would be enough for most people who've watched the channel before. But you want to actually define it more pedantically.
You can define the manosphere, and then I think use me as the example as an incel.
I would have, before I saw your definitions, I would have defined the manosphere as an online space where pissed off men voice their pissed offness. I think is the compound noun. Yeah. Because and there are, on the one hand, it's unhealthy. On the one hand, there's a misogynistic strand. But to now follow Melon Seed's advice and try and stay in the middle, I do think there have been feminizing trends in society that at least partially, and I emphasize partially, justify some of the pushback.
Yeah.
So if I can be serious for a second, one of the examples, and I'll use a shield. There's I think she's brilliant. She's an ex-philosophy academic called Kathleen Stock. Have you come across her, Stuart?
No, but there's another similar. Did she write a book in the 70s? I'll have to go through my notes in a sec. It might be the same lady, but there was one
I
lady that I
doubt
came
it because I
across.
don't think she's that old. But Kathleen Stock
So it'll be
was.
something different.
I always confuse it whether it was Essex or Sussex. I think it was Sussex, but she
Right.
was I think she was a senior lecturer at Sussex University in the philosophy department, and she left because, as a philosopher, she refused to accept that women have todgers. So she was what's called gender critical. And she's
Okay.
written, she happens to be a lesbian, if that matters to anybody, but I'm just putting her credentials out there. She's not a man, because I've noticed the, the perfect gender balance we have on this panel. But Kathleen Stock is a woman, and she's from a philosophy background, and she argues beautifully. And she's just done an article today about the way in which she uses two examples. One is assisted suicide, and one is, I don't know whether people know, but if you're not from the UK, but in the UK, they're going through the process of legalizing. We're not talking about abortion in general. I know people, it's a triggering, huge, controversial subject, but they've decriminalized abortion up until the point of birth. So women can, legal profession can still be charged if they aid and abet, but women can also get the drugs and right up to the point of birth, abort baby, child, fetus, whatever you want to call it. And Kathleen Stock deconstructs this and links it to the whole assisted suicide. And one of her arguments is there's this, I think it is a feminine property, but this movement to, inverted commas, kindness. So you're kind to trans people, and that's why you're not allowed to point out, actually, for thousands of years, women haven't had todgers. This isn't complicated stuff, but in order to be kind, you don't say certain things, or you indulge people. If someone wants to identify as a hedgehog, which has happened in UK schools, children, you don't say, grow up, you little prat, we're not going to indulge you like your parents do. Get real. No, you have to be kind. You have to put a litter box out for them if they decide to be a cat. And this has all happened. So these are the ludicrous times we live in. And she's saying part of it is the kindness. And with very, very late stage abortions, what she's saying is there's an inconsistency and a feminine illogicality whereby the women are treated, on the one hand, as I think she calls them omniscient agents. They are the only people capable of deciding what's good for them. But on the other hand, they want to decriminalize anything they decide to do, no matter how bad, because they are pure victims. And Kathleen Stock, as a woman, is saying, this is inconsistent, it's irrational, it doesn't make any sense. And just to be kind to women in a difficult situation does not mean you excuse terrible things. So what I'm interested in on a more general level is, I see it in the trans issue, I see it with the Palestine-Gaza things, all these political issues no one wants to talk about because they're incredibly contentious. At least part of them are driven by this perception. I think you could call it virtue signaling, but if you're kind, that can actually allow you to say quite a few outrageous, quite unkind things.
Yeah.
And kindness, the way Kathleen Stock describes it, so very specifically, in the UK, the people who've led the assisted suicide and the late-term abortion decriminalisation have all been women. It may be a coincidence, but I do think this kindness agenda has been driven largely by women. So I think the manosphere, there's a very long-winded way of answering your question, I think the manosphere is partly a feeling of helplessness, a feeling of not being used to this type of environment that's increasingly, in Schopenhauer's terms, it's not purely rational. It's more about emotions. It's more about feelings. It's more about identity in various groups. And I don't think these things are particularly typically male.
Yeah.
What do you two think?
Well, I was just going to say on a point that you were talking about there, about the sort of, killing them with kindness, like someone said in the chat. It's quite unusual. Did you see earlier in the week with the Olympics banning trans athletes in the...
Yeah, that's just happened.
It's been quite interesting to see the media response to that. Auntie Beeb had a headline that was like, women's events are going to be constrained to just women. And I was like, what?
Yeah, shock horror. Yeah.
But it's like, that's a weird way to it. Like, even because obviously,
Yeah.
you know, Bieber are clearly a left-leaning organization. They clearly have that kind of political bent. Fine, I suppose. But it's like, to say that, are they kind of implying that women are handicapped in some way? I can't remember the specifics of the headline now, but it read as if to say, like, well, now that trans athletes aren't in it, it's going to be boring again.
Yeah,
Like,
I think the big debate was over like the basically testosterone levels, and I think it goes quite deep into some quite interesting biology. But the argument was overall that women who were or kind of people identifying as women who were born as male and therefore have testes have a higher kind of latent ability due to more testosterone. So a sport obviously involves strength, and testosterone equals mass strength. But yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of arguments about this whole kind of testosterone level with doping. We've seen testosterone level, race. We're not even going to go there. But some people have argued, race is an issue in women's sports, and women's sports should be segregated. Very extreme kind of out there right wing thoughts. But I would say that there was definitely an argument that women themselves within women's competitions were arguing that this is unfair. A trans athlete comes in, anyone can say I identify as a woman, but then you have the physiology of a man, and does that give an unfair performance advantage? And fortunately, I'm never going to be in that position. I'm neither a world-class athlete nor B, trans or a woman, so I'm never going to have to deal with that. But obviously, obviously it causes issues.
Yeah, but it's interesting to see how, like Paul said, it's kind of like the mental gymnastics you have to do. Like, okay, we mustn't offend these people, we mustn't upset these people, but then obviously in doing that, it does upset, this other group, and then that's a protected group as well, and then it's constantly like, we can't say that, and it's the sort of jumping between the hot coals.
I think the big issue is and this is something that is so simple but often gets overlooked, and all three of us here have been in the media business in some shape or form, but the media amplifies strong positions. The media thrives on conflict, and I think the issue is we have these things like trans rights issues and Palestine, Gaza, and protests and things like that. They get pushed to the fore because it's just media gold. It's arguments, it's shouting, it's aggression. But I think if we took a step back from it and just really asked the question, I mean, how many people does this impact, and why does it get so much airtime? If that makes any sense. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, can we look at the actual text? Because I risk losing it. Because no, I do think there is this issue about, to bring it back to Schopenhauer, one of Schopenhauer's basic arguments, whether it's right or wrong, is that men are driven by rationality and women tend to be more emotion-based.
Yeah.
Now, that is obviously a massive simplification, but as with most either stereotypes or simplifications, there's a scintilla of truth. Yeah. And there has been a feminization in society that has been translated into, and when I say feminization in society, my bugbear that I'll always go on about is bureaucracy. And I think what happens is traditional male ways of dealing with things that have been confrontation, even violence-based, have increasingly been reduced to technocratic structures and bureaucracies. And in those structures, women, when they show aggression, it tends not to be physical. It tends to be backstabbing, gossip, and all the things that actually happen in organizational complex structures. And I've witnessed that, I'm sure you did, Stuart, at universities. This happens all the time. And there are things me and another man would have said to each other, and the argument would have been solved one way or the other. And I've been in situations where people use bureaucracy and, get it away from personalities at social and political levels. Issues aren't confronted head on because there's a never-ending deferral. Using process is the word always used. Or things aren't dealt with because you can hide behind these layers of insulation. So there are many, many things of traditional patriarchal society, to use all the feminist terms, that are probably good that they're gone. But there are also, when anything's lost, there's always a counterbalancing force. And this idea that nothing can actually, well, very little anymore is ever addressed head on. That in the UK at the moment, for example, it's quite funny that the UK Prime Minister, he's gone through this phase where at Prime Minister's question time, when people are asked, the whole point is, giveaway, the title of the process is Prime Minister's question time. And recently he just hasn't answered any questions. He's asked questions in response to questions.
That goes back to Boris, though. I think Boris, from memory, at least David Cameron would try to answer the questions, but I think Boris would just obfuscate.
But he was told off by the Speaker. And this is one of the interesting things. Recently, a Tory MP said to the Speaker, will you tell the PM to answer questions?
Yeah, will you castigate
And he
him?
said, I can't, I don't have that authority. And people have now shown footage of the same Speaker telling Boris Johnson to answer the question.
That's interesting.
But again, it's about not dealing with things directly. And I do think this constant deferral, this constant setting up of structures, I think that perhaps, I don't know what you think, but I think that maybe fuels an aspect of the manosphere. You have men who tend to be more suited to direct action, to finding solutions, to physical force, sometimes to violence, but all these outcomes orientated tendencies and characteristics, and you find yourself in this never-ending bureaucracy where nothing ever gets done. And with nowhere to go, with nothing to do, and with traditional male values being frowned upon, what I'm doing now would be called mansplaining. And there's all these pejorative phrases now for anything a man does. And I think on the back of that, the manosphere has grown up.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can trace the growth of the manosphere to genuine reasons. I think what's interesting about the manosphere is this subsection of the incel culture, which, I mean, if we just scroll on to the next slide, there's a lot of videos on YouTube specifically linking Schopenhauer's On Women essay to this incel culture. And this incel culture, that even who doesn't know, but I think most people know now, is involuntary celibacy. Is basically people who have issues forming relationships, and they've constructed a whole subculture around the fact that they see themselves as, I guess, like lower down the pecking order when it comes to relationships. And this links into Schopenhauer in his concept of the will. And it's also very clear in the text, which we'll get onto right now, that the will, this natural order, that women are more attracted or therefore what the incel subculture calls a Chad, an alpha male, a kind of a 10 out of 10 sort of man. So in
Don't
a sense,
talk about me like that when I'm actually here. I'll get embarrassed, Stuart, please.
You're the macho iberico. You be carry chest. Should we get into the text then? Have a chat about it.
Yeah, go on.
Here we go. Just gonna add it to the stage. Can remove that. Add to the stage. Here we go. So I'll zoom in for the hard of
Can
vision.
I just quickly deal with, or not deal with, but answer Sebastian in the comments is raising the issue about it's spurious or infantile to link Schopenhauer to concepts, to use the word incel. I think the reason we're doing it is it's already been done.
It's exactly, yeah. It's a critique of why it's been done, essentially.
And the other thing I'd say is we can all argue over the appropriate terms to be used, but I wouldn't suggest that Schopenhauer, there are various reasons we can talk about, but as we'll now look at the text, it's pretty clear he didn't have a very healthy, we can use all these euphemisms, but he had an issue with women. I think that's quite clear. Yeah. In his own biographical details, he had a issue with his mother, who ironically was a very successful author when he wasn't within his own lifetime until the very end. Yep. But I also read, have you heard this? There was a woman who accused him of pushing her downstairs and injuring her. And I think it was a complete setup. But he lost the court case and was forced to pay her a pension. And until she died, and when she died, he made some comment about, finally, the weight is off my back. Yeah, but I think that's obviously fueled. If you were paying a woman money because she deceitfully, and that's a theme throughout the essay, that women tend to use deceit And it goes to my point about men tend to be more violent and more directly confrontational, whereas he's arguing that no, it was duplicitous what she did. So again, not excusing it, I'm just describing some of the context that might have given him this lifelong dislike or problem with certain women.
Yeah, and of course, this little thing on the screen I found is a quote from a letter from his mother. So he had a notoriously bad relationship with his mother.
Well,
tell me about your mother, as Fred would say. No, my mum's lovely. Hi, Mum.
my alternative name to girl power, Mardy Spice, was actually Norman Bates, because I thought it picked up on the mother issue, but...
Oh, no. Don't go down in Paul's basement.
Yeah. Well, it also struck me with reference to incels. I think you could argue there are two types of men. There are incels who live in their mother's basement, and there are men who keep their mothers in their basement. And that is the dichotomous way of thinking about the incel culture, maybe.
Potentially.
Yeah. Although Norman Bates, she was in the attic, wasn't she, rather than the basement?
I thought it was the basement. Hitchcock, I'm sure it's the basement. I haven't seen it for a long time.
Oh, no, you're right. It was the basement.
I'm sure it's the basement.
She's up in her room, isn't she? In the window? Rocking back and forward?
No, there's definitely, I think you're right, there's definitely a time when she's in the basement, but he does bring her out on special occasions.
Maybe he brings her up to the bedroom for special occasions.
I thought he gets
Incontinent Jay is now uppercase shouting at us. She was in the basement.
Okay.
I've got my concerns about Jay. I think he's got a few things in his basement. Yeah, he did carry her around the house. I remember that.
Yeah, don't we all?
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, Paul, it's your favorite essay of all time. Where should we start?
Well, first of all, I'm just looking. I think you have a different... Yeah, it's a different translation, but don't let that worry you. It's the first bit I found slightly confusing, because you could definitely interpret the first bit as it's quite positive and enthusiastic about the value of women.
Well, that's the thing. I don't see negativity necessarily. I see Schopenhauer is trying to basically put the pieces in order and say that there is a natural order. You know, his big philosophy is all about the will, and he's saying the will is there is a natural order. But then it kind of jumps between this idea of men having their kind of makeup and position, and women having their makeup and position. But then you get these kind of like stabs of what could be construed as misogyny to a modern reader.
Because I get the sense you're bullshitting slightly, Stuart.
No,
if you go to the first, after his initially nice comments in the first section, the beginning of the second section, you've, like I say, my translation's slightly different and probably better. Even the sight of the female form demonstrates that woman is destined neither for great mental nor for physical works. So that would be the first charge against him. That's not potentially the nicest thing one could say.
But is it a bad thing? Because if we think historically and we put Schopenhauer in context, then, and especially culturally, this wouldn't have necessarily been a negative thing for him to say. I mean, it is obviously nowadays, but at the time, would this have been taken as controversial? That would be my big question, Paul.
Well, the one thing I'd give you on that is, and it's something I very rarely raise in public, because like with all of this is basically our marriages down the drain. The channel I've carefully cultivated with this avuncular personas down the drain.
You suggested it. You really too much show, Ran. You'd suicide your channel.
I honestly don't think it did. But there are serious studies that suggest that on the spectrum of psychopathology at one end, and genius at the other, so pure evil and pure genius, men tend to be more extreme. Men tend to inhabit the extremes. So when you, for example, point out there haven't been that many brilliant female composers, and you can say, well, for social reasons, blah, 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 there still haven't, despite increasing social equality. There have been good female writers, but there haven't been. There's disproportionately, philosophy, for example, is absolutely dominated by men. Mathematics is absolutely dominated by men at the highest levels. So I'm not sure it's particularly sexist or misogynistic to say that if you're accepting that there are very, very few female serial killers, but there are very, very few women at the highest levels of cultural achievement, maybe that's the trade-off.
Yeah, but the big question will be, is that a biological or an essential issue? And obviously Schopenhauer is not talking about this in terms of biological terminology, but he's talking about in terms of essentialism. He does it a little bit later, but it's more of an essentialist position.
Sorry to interrupt, Stuart, but this is important. Again, I think you're blethering, but what's the difference in biological essentialism? What was the distinction you made?
So I would say Schopenhauer's essentialism is it lacks evidence. It's basically he's using this transcendental term of the will as a kind of a catch-all, whereas I think biological in issue where you would have some evidence to say, okay, these neurons, this hormones in the brain or something are distinctly different.
Right, but so then why does he rely quite significantly upon childbirth as one of his prime examples?
But I think we're talking about the difference between the capacity for a man and a woman for cultural pursuits. I thought that's what we're talking about now.
No, it's all blended in though. But he's also arguing, correct me if I'm wrong, during the essay that because women have a biological imperative to propagate the species, their loyalty ultimately is to the species at some subliminal level, and they have no loyalty to individual men. That's one example. He also makes we'll get onto it soon, but the quite laugh out loud funny, nasty, naughty, horrible comparison he makes with a queen ant's wings falling off.
Oh, that's it, yeah.
And so do women lose their beauty after the second child.
Yeah.
Well, that strikes me as slightly biological essentialist. No?
Yeah, but I think we're talking about capacity. I mean, my argument is that's what he's saying, but then do we have the evidence today? Because I think you're talking about examples of today with culture that you're saying there's no female composers, but there's something like that. The issue I'm saying is that do we have the evidence to point that reason being biological based, if that makes any sense?
No, I'm speculating. I'd totally admitted, but I would also suggest I don't think it's unreasonable. You could argue there is very strong evidence. Have you ever seen, just out of interest, on oil rigs when they change the oil drills? Have you seen on YouTube men doing that?
Yeah,
there's oil everywhere.
Yeah, it's an insane job. Yeah, super dangerous. Yeah, very messy.
I might be wrong, but I'd be very, very surprised if there were any women who do that job. And that's interesting because you're not allowed to say that, even though you or I, or James, I don't think any of us three, and I'm a 16 stone bulky bloke, I couldn't do it. So what chance would a woman half my weight have of doing that? There are still, and all those dangerous jobs. One of my funniest things, my weird pastimes is watching late night YouTube videos of crowd trouble all kicking off with 4'11" police women trying to control riots. It's a joke.
No, that is an issue. Yeah, I'll give you that one. Yeah.
So these are the examples where biological essentialism is frowned upon in civilized discussion, but the practical effects of not recognizing it are all around us.
But haven't we also got quite a lot of evidence now that we've been pushing, girls in STEM and all that kind of stuff for a long time, and the numbers aren't really coming along, and that's not necessarily cultural, a cultural force harnessing them in. That's the opposite, trying to push them into things, and maybe they're not adopting it as much as we would expect them to. If we did take away, the sort of gatekeeping natural biology kind of argument, it seems to me that there's a lot of drive to push people into boxes that maybe they don't necessarily fit in.
But the question then is, why would or wouldn't they fit in? And all of this is premised upon the fact there are spectrums. So there are masculine women and effeminate men.
Yeah.
Within the genders, there is variety. So I'm not claiming essentialism in that sense.
Yeah.
But I am saying there are certain biological essentialisms, and all of this, when you get into the whole trans debates, is just being ideology supplants and displaces actual biological facts. And I do think during the whole Schopenhauer essay, he's quite obviously referring to certain biological essentialist arguments. I do also accept, Stuart, that there's a wider significance to his overall philosophical project. So his concept of the will and his concept of the life force is it? What's this? I always forget it. What's the Buddhist phrase for the whole circle of life?
Samsara.
That's right. Sorry, samsara.
Yeah.
I think this is why I think he emphasizes the instinctual nature of femininity.
Yeah.
Because he's linking it to this concept of you want to be able to reflect upon life as, unhappy, and the best you can hope for is a lack of pain. But you can also have it in his theory of aesthetics. He argues that we are also able to look at and reflect upon and contemplate the will, the life force, the samsara, through art and great literature and all these things.
Yeah, because he was, just to point out for people who don't know Schopenhauer, he was quite influenced by Buddhism and Hinduism as well, I believe.
Is it the Upanishads?
Upanishads, Rig Veda, and the Upanishads that he drew from. I mean, he never claimed that he was plagiarizing or taking it, but he was influenced. He had his own views. The big giveaway is that his prescription is very different to what a Buddhist prescription will be. What do you do about eternal suffering? A Buddhist would do something different. Schopenhauer retreats into aesthetics or works of art, but he addresses it directly in his work. I think he was one of the first Western philosophers to really engage with Eastern religion.
I do like, just for purely aesthetic writing style reasons, the women are suited to be nurses and governesses of our earliest childhood precisely by the fact that they themselves are childish, silly, and short-sighted. So this is more evidence of your argument, Stuart, that he really didn't have an issue with women. In a word, big children their whole life long. A sort of intermediate stage between a child and a man, who is the actual human being. So the man, according to Schopenhauer, is the actual human being. The woman is between a child and a man. So like half a human being. Are you still arguing that he's quite down with the ladies?
No, not this part. I mean, I'm not saying he creates a hierarchy. I don't think he's directly criticism women, but he's using this to create a hierarchy to say that there is a natural order, i.e. the will. And men are fulfilling one aspect of this process, and women are there to fulfill another process. And I think the issue he has is when women step outside of what he's arguing is their essential role. Does that make any sense?
I think you're scrabbling to defend him.
I was going to say I didn't really get that.
Didn't get it.
No, I get what you're saying. But
James, do you think we should take a moment now and psychoanalyze why Stuart's so desperate to defend this rampant misogyny? Because this is really interesting.
I'm not defending it.
To be honest,
I'm not defending it. I'm not supporting it.
You're not only defending it, Stuart. You look visibly excited by the whole process of defending it.
No, I'm trying to unpack.
Just watch him dig.
Basically, I'm trying to work out. I'm trying to work out why he's doing it. I think the thing is, it's with a philosopher.
So you can copy him.
Copy that. I think it's interesting with the philosopher is that basically to try and work out. I know he has a bigger project. I've read his bigger project.
I do think you're scrabbling, but also I think I'm just getting slightly giddy because I've never really experienced being the more reasonable person in a debate before. So I've got like a feeling of like intellectual vertigo.
Oh no.
You're out unreasonabling me.
Oh no, Paul. I know.
Right, so this is Stuart's reading is a sort of intermediate stage between a child and a man who is the actual human being. So that's nothing wrong. Just look at a girl as she dawdles, dances around with, and sings to a child for days. And then imagine what a man doing his utmost could achieve in her stead. Yep.
Yeah, no, I still, I'm not, I'm going to dig a bit further, and I still genuinely believe, I don't think he's putting women down and saying like, I hate women, men are stronger. I think he truly believes in this, and it's not something I agree with, but he truly believes in this, this proper place for the two sexes.
So what you're saying is essentially that he's not degrading or talking down to women there. He's actually putting them on a little bit of a pedestal, saying like men would just charge in and get it wrong.
But basically, he's creating a hierarchy in a sense that men are better, men have higher capacity,
right?
Which nowadays is wrong, and I would disagree with that personally very deeply. But if we take his whole cultural milieu at the time, he's basically taking issue with the fact that he sees a specific place for women,
right,
and a specific place for men, and he's criticizing it. But at the same time, he to reconcile with his overall project, he's admitting in the text overall that there needs to be the place for women. There needs to be the proper function of a woman. There needs to be a proper function of a man within the process of the will. That's that's my argument.
Right.
Okay. Maybe it's lost in translation.
maybe lost in
not
translation.
Not you. I mean, like maybe the text, the translation.
Well, it's lost culturally. It's lost in cultural translation. When we take something out of this today.
Stuart's just a realist, so I just dropped in the comments. By the way,
thank you. I'm not just talking shit. So, well, I might be, and someone's misconstrued.
I get what you're saying, and I think
Oh, well, just further evidence of how reasonable Stuart's position is. For just as the female ant after copulation loses its now superfluous wings, which are even dangerous for the purposes of breeding, it's never stopped me, so too woman loses her beauty after 1 or 2 births, probably even for the same reason. Any comments, Stuart?
So we go, just bring it up. Well, the problem is we're looking at this through the lens of, contemporary notions of beauty, where basically saying a woman is only valuable when she's attractive, when she's beautiful. So I think Schopenhauer is just pointing out a biological fact, if that makes any sense, from his perspective. I don't think he's saying women become useless, so they have children, then they become ugly. Because if you look at Schopenhauer's biography, I don't think the attractiveness of women is something that he particularly dwelled deeply upon. I think
there is an inconsistency, isn't there? Because I think I've got even better looking as I've got older and look more distinguished. So I think men of a certain type, comme moi, actually improve with age rather than diminish. So that is a complicating issue.
But if we're not going through this in order, I'm going to bring out my killer point. So when he starts talking about prostitutes and polygamy,
well, that's the funny bit about the moment.
You can tell he was thinking of converting, but he's basic. If we can highlight the point, so he takes criticism with the idea of the lady, this kind of high and mighty version of the woman, but then he really demonstrates, I guess, like a kind of sympathy for prostitutes, and says that in this monogamy, men still have this desire to procreate with many women, but monogamy locks both parties in. And he says the problem is with this at his time, as we talked about with Proust, Paul, in Proust's time, prostitution was looked on as something terrible, but it was like a necessity. And this is basically a kind of like for like of what's in Proust in his kind of observations. That there's a kind of a sense here that these prostitutes are. Paul, in the past, was it in Greek civilization where they had those temples, but basically like kind of holy women, like prostitutes. What was it called?
Yeah, well, they were basically the temple. I'm trying to find.
I'm trying to think of the name.
A non-insulting word.
Knocking shops, Greek knocking shops. It's called
religious knocking shops.
Religious, yeah. It wasn't just go to go, do your thing. It had some cultural and religious significance. Whereas he's saying, prostitutes, these women have to fulfill a biological need for a man to procreate with multiple women, but in a monogamous relationship, that is not possible in his society. So you end up with these women who have to suffer deeply in this kind of gray area, and he's directly saying here that this is a terrible fate for women. So my argument would be, if he really hates women so much, why there's sympathy for the prostitutes. Wouldn't he be saying, "Oh, prostitutes, dirty this, dirty that"? Have no sympathy for them. Do you understand what I mean?
Well, yeah, but then again, his overall philosophy was about caring for humanity in general. So I'm not ever claiming he was a monster. Yeah. I'm just saying he did have quite prejudiced views, and I totally buy you have to adapt to the culture of his time, but even by the standards of his time, I think he was quite harsh. Before I forget, there was a bit about, I think he mentions, he doesn't use the word, but sooty, not sooty and sweet, but sooty,
the puppet,
as the wives throwing themselves on the funeral pyre.
The in Hinduism, he talks about it. Yeah,
but I remember an anecdote where there was a British colonel and the local leader. They now call them community leaders in the UK, but the local leader said, "How dare you try and stop us?" Because the colonel said, "You cannot burn that woman," and he said, "It is our local custom." So the colonel said, quick as a flash, "Fine, please do go ahead and burn her, but can I just let you know, our custom is to hang people who commit murder, and we will carry out our custom."
Yeah.
And I found that this idea about you have to, at the end of the day, give primacy to one custom over another. You can't do this mix and match and always defer actually ever making a decision.
Yeah.
But is it also, to go back to the segment that you brought up, Stuart, isn't he also talking about how like women... Oh, maybe I read it wrong, or maybe I just read it earlier and interpreted it wrong. But is it not that he's talking about how misogyny is great because a man can pretty much just own several women? Or I'd need to read the passage again.
No, I'm with Stuart on this one. I think he's actually saying the general good would be better served and harm to women would be reduced if polygamy. So the final, comment at the very end, close to the end, is the Mormons were right.
Yeah, but I think I read somewhere in there. I'm just, don't pay no attention to me because I think I'm waffling. But I thought there was something in there about the Mormons. Oh, I don't know. I'd have to read it again. Sorry.
Well, in principle, like my 5 mistresses are all very, very happy, so it can work.
They always seem very happy when you watch those Mormon specials, don't they? And maybe they're
cheery. I've always got time when they come knocking. I'll always have a chat with them.
Yeah,
very, very interesting people.
Yeah, they've got your house basically marked now, so none of them will stop. Don't go there. That bloke speaks to us rather too enthusiastically. Oh, you're about to show us something.
Alexander Rodriguez says that women need multiple baby daddies. Any takers?
Paul.
It's an assertion. I'm not quite clear with the evidence for the assertion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we try and link it to incel culture, I think the big issue that is seen as is this hierarchy that Schopenhauer talks about in the essay. That strong, beautiful men are always going to be pursued and desired by
Stuart. I'm getting
best
embarrassed again.
I'm not talking about you.
All right.
Talking about me anyway. So yeah, basically.
Seriously, I'm sorry to distract you, but it's one of the reasons I live in the countryside. Because you remember when I worked at Leeds, it's walking down the street, beating women off with a stick, throwing themselves at me. It's very time-consuming, very off-putting. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, I know, but those were only homeless women, Paul, remember? And they were after money. Yeah. So swiftly moving on from Tales of Leeds. We don't want to go there today. So I've lost my train of thought now. So yeah, I think this is what's used, I guess, by when incel channels kind of take this essay and use it as kind of Paul's gone mute. It's this argument that there's a natural order that yes, it's very natural for there to be. I think is it the 80-20 rule? Basically 80% of women pursue 20% of men or something like that. So the 20% are the alphas, the chads, and then other men who are not perceived as being of the standard of the kind of the breed specific, if we want to talk about it like that, negated and neglected. So to draw on Schopenhauer
how
in
you
his
felt about
purity,
that, James?
It's been a struggle.
Right. But you don't want to expand upon that?
I'd rather not.
All right.
No.
That's understandable. I just thought I'd add a bit of colour to Stuart's argument. Carry on, Stuart.
So I keep forgetting. I keep being off put by you, this mad guy in the corner. Anyway,
He's so brutal to me tonight.
I know, poor James. Anyway, so logically, Schopenhauer is basically saying this is the will, this is normal. So forget the misogyny, forget the kind of the devaluing and then the hierarchy. Women as the second sex. If we take Schopenhauer at face value and through his argument, what he's saying is that it's a normal situation. There's a situation where women are going to pursue the best men, and it is for the survival of the species. Women are hardwired to go for the best genetics, and that is how the species survives, and that is normal. That is the will. Whereas in incel culture, there's a recognition of that, but there's also, I think we would need to bring in Baudrillard, Lacan, Freud, all these kind of psychoanalysts. Why, therefore, is it an issue if this is the natural order? Why is there a resentment that I am not the alpha male, I am not the Chad, I don't get the woman? And Schopenhauer would say, well, don't worry about women, just focus on art, focus on asceticism, focus on being a man, which is all kind of manosphere prescriptions. But incel culture specifically takes big issues of this and then has to kind of try and negate women in general.
We don't need to go into it now, Stuart, but just to throw it in there, it is interesting, Baudrillard's whole notion of seduction.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm guessing it would be diametrically opposed to Schopenhauer's, because Baudrillard found great value in seduction. The toing and throwing, the ambiguity, the nuance, the tension.
Exactly, yeah.
Whereas Schopenhauer, it's one of my criticisms of Schopenhauer is that there's a dichotomous way. He writes really beautifully, Schopenhauer, but there's a dichotomy going on that isn't particularly subtle. Whereas I think Baudrillard takes vaguely similar ideas and makes much more of them.
No, absolutely. And that's the issue. That there's this almost like kind of black and white reading of romance and love and procreation in Schopenhauer, which transfers over into this incel subsection of the manosphere. That it's like relationship, no relationship, with a partner, not with a partner. And I think this is something that someone like Baudrillard has more of a stronger take on when it comes to kind of prescribing what do you do about it. That, relationships are messy. Having a connection with the other in philosophical terms is not as simple as I want to be with that person, I'm going to be with that person, if that makes any sense. So is that the Guinness getting open?
I'm doing my nitro surge pin method for any beer nuts out there.
So I thought you were doing a wee in a pint glass.
No, you do this. You get it's basically use a nitro surge on cans not necessarily designed for a nitro surge by sticking a pin, letting all the gas out, and then using the nitro surge.
That's interesting.
Very technical.
Yeah.
Skipping the text for a brief beer pit stop, I think. What's highlighted on screen, Stuart? Can you read it out?
Yeah. It is useless to argue about polygamy. It must be taken as fact existing anywhere, the mere regulation which is the problem to be solved.
Is this the advocate of baby mamas?
I was just going to say Alexander Rodriguez, who's loving the chat tonight.
Getting stuck in.
He agrees. He loves
it.
Many
times, judging by his attitude.
That's it. I think it's difficult. I mean, the whole incel thing itself is difficult to really understand.
Get away from.
Well, it's difficult for me to understand, not because I had such success with women, but it's more, I just haven't had to worry about it for a long time. But I do have friends that I think they would quite proudly call themselves incels by choice.
Mm.
But isn't that a contradiction in terms? I thought the whole point was involuntarily celibate.
Well, that's why I think that whole incel thing is bastardized and it's kind of morph in, and
Well, by choice is called something else. It's an acronym. It's something like MGTOW or something. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's basically, you remove yourself from the dating pool by choice because you want more time for yourself. I mean, this would be the more authentic Schopenhauerian response to it. Is like, you don't worry about procreation. You don't worry about the fact that you don't have a missus. You just remove yourself from it all. And this will be the ultimate kind of control over the will. You remove yourself from the will, and removing yourself from the will will be just, potentially just kind of playing computer games, building a wooden house, buying a dog, just getting away from the whole society's procreation, society's relationships. So that's a more authentic reading of Schopenhauer, I'd say, this other kind of manosphere subculture.
Should we move on? I feel like we're treading water. Oh no!
No, there's loads to talk about. What should we talk about?
Move on. Next.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the text. We'd got to the bit after the ant copulating.
Yeah, that's back up top, isn't it?
Let's get back to the copulating ants.
Oh, one thing about, I don't know whether this is a defense of Schopenhauer or not, but one criticism would be he reduced women to overly simplistic. He made them, as I quoted earlier, some way not quite a full human being. But there are aspects of contemporary culture that I'm surprised women allow to happen. So one provocative example would be drag queens. The number of women who find it a form of entertainment, when I find it, you could call it woman face. Blackface. Blackface isn't accepted anymore. But why?
Yeah.
It's a hyper exaggerated. It's basically drag queens are Schopenhauer in practice. It's Schopenhauer's view of women caricatured and put on a stage. And I personally, as a proto-feminist, I find it incredibly offensive, drag queens.
Yeah. What was Schopenhauer's drag act name? Do you remember, Paul?
Cupid Stunt.
No, Willa Representation.
Oh, there you go.
That's the one. So
it.
yeah, he had the secret side.
But would you the whole drag queen thing, and then it's a hornet's nest. But when people claim to identify as women, I find it interesting that when they inhabit the role of a woman that they claim to identify as, they often have an exaggerated sense. So they will buy loads of makeup, they will buy loads of clothes. You know that Dylan Mulvaney character? It's this hyper feminized notion of what a woman is, which is very like Schopenhauer. All they do is interest themselves in trinkets and superficial things. Well, there are aspects of that interpretation of what it is to be a woman that's occurring in contemporary society, but not being judged negatively because it's on the right side of the identity culture wars.
Well, I wouldn't. I do agree with that, and I wonder as well whether there's the sexual dimension to it that women, through kind of identifying with drag culture, they can identify with this kind of hyper feminized view, but they're also identifying with males that don't kind of pose any sexual threat, if that makes any sense. And I think that's why, I mean, Manchester is a great example. The gay village in Manchester, there's a big problem in the gay village. Gay men are, and lesbians as well, are really pissed off with all these stag do's coming and people who are heterosexual, specifically women, trying to get into the gay clubs because they see that as a space for gay men. And suddenly you've got heterosexual women coming to gay clubs. The reason why the heterosexual women want to do that is they want to go for a night out without being hassled by men, is the given reason. So I'm wondering whether drag queens are not that seen as a direct attack of femininity. They're almost seen as a safe space, and drag clubs and gay clubs especially, where women can go and they don't have that pressure to perform sexually. Does that make any sense?
It does, but I don't think it addresses the issue square on, because there's still the problem. I understand gay men, and this is something, well, I don't understand. That's the point.
I know you do.
If you're a gay man, go and Roger other men senseless. knock yourself out literally and metaphorically. Why do you have to dress as an over hyper exaggerated woman in order to get your kicks? I don't understand that. I don't understand what that has to do with wanting sex with other men. James, from your personal experience, what do you think?
I have no personal experience, sadly, to draw on, but I do think it's just weird. I think it's a product of the weird modernity that we live in. But
specifically, my point, tell me whether you think it's a bad or a good one. This idea that Schopenhauer's presenting this exaggeratedly simplistic portrayal of what it is to be a woman.
Yeah.
Yet that is happening in our society today. And yet people will absolutely be outraged by what Schopenhauer has to say, but they won't be outraged by drag queens. They actually think it's liberatory and something to be approved of.
I think drag has a historical perspective to it. It has this kind of Rabelaisian like carnival transgression in a sense where you're performing something abstract, something that's not you, to be transgressive. Does that make any sense? Literally trans.
But Stuart, so did blackface.
Well, exactly. So the question would be
why there was a whole history of the black and white minstrels. But that is no longer accepted. My direct question is, because you're deviating and deflecting all the time. My direct question, you deviating deflector, is if the black and white minstrel show is no longer allowed, why are drag queens still not just tolerated but celebrated?
Well, I think blackface has direct connections to slavery and has direct connections to physical violence. I think that's the issue. I think when you add in violence, it goes beyond ideology and goes into physical threats. So blackface, because of that, is not seen as culturally acceptable anymore. Whereas, you had the Stonewall riots was in New York, related to the gay village there, and then there was violence related to drag. But there's never been a point in time where men who dress up as women have been shackled and forced to pick cotton. Does that make any sense? That would be my comeback.
Well, ironically, at pride marches, they would being shackled, tied up, and led around on chains like dogs would actually become a perverse incentive. So,
but that's being given consent, though. they want that.
Yeah, I honestly struggle to understand the double standard, and I think it's an interesting blind spot in contemporary society. I understand the nuance you've just added. I think they're good points, but still, I don't think, even if so, for example, along the lines you're talking about, let's take the violence. I understand the black and white minstrels is quite an extreme example, but white people wearing cornrows have been objected to as cultural appropriation. There are lots of things you can't or shouldn't do. And then there are...
I think they're extreme examples. Yeah, I would push back on that and say that I think they're extreme examples. They're legitimate examples. Absolutely.
What's extreme about having cornrows as a white person?
No, there's nothing extreme about it. But what I mean is the example given is true that there are some people of color who take cultural issues with that. But I would push back and say how many people are really bothered about that. Is this not an example of kind of media pushing extreme positions as kind of normalized fact? That's what I would argue. But it's true. I have read news stories that people have been, criticized for cornrows as cultural appropriation. But then if you actually look into that, that's a bizarre, strange perspective because cornrows are not specific to black culture. Does that make any sense?
I think Paul's dropped out. He's had enough.
He's had enough. Yeah. Where's he gone? Maybe he's had a bad connection.
Maybe.
He's coming back.
I think the whole...
Where is he? Here he is.
He's back. He's back.
Did you go to the toilet?
No, I had some dust on my... this isn't a euphemism. I had dust on my finger pad. So I brushed it off.
Dust. Was it white and creamy?
Stuart.
I thought you just took exception to Stuart's use and overuse of the word pushback, or the words pushback in this context.
No, the constant deflecting and babbling and blethering was getting to me, but that's not the reason I left.
I didn't mean pushback in that context.
Paul just checked out for a moment. He's just having a nap.
That's it.
Anyway, James, what do you think? Just put you on the spot.
Oh, too many things. No, I think really it's I kind of get what you're both saying, and I think that you're both bringing up interesting points. I think that the drag thing is wrapped up in other politicized elements, and that's why it's not culturally, shunned in the way that the minstrels are for different reasons.
Right, but that would. Sorry to bang on about this, but I think it's an important point. That would be a level of degree, not the actual category we're discussing. So they're both wrong. One is more extremely wrong than the other.
Well, no, I think.
But to say one is more extreme than the other doesn't preclude the less extreme thing still being wrong.
But I'm not sure how wrong one thing is considered over the other in certain circles that are using it for political. Like the minstrel thing is used, rightly so, for one political point of view and pathway. I don't know.
Right, well, let's put it this way. I know women who are vehemently can't stand drag queens.
Yeah, so do I.
For they find it woman face. They really are offended by it. Yeah. But they don't speak out in public because they would not be listened to. And you just get into an almighty argument with people about it.
Yeah. That's what I mean. I think they're used in different ways, aren't they?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. I understand the practicalities of why they're not perceived. I'm just wondering. I'm trying to get some agreement that actually they're different extremes, but of the same type of phenomenon, a simplified, exaggerated caricature, whether it's of race or of gender, and yet there are different cultural sensitivities to the same basic process.
Yeah, no,
I agree with that. I agree with this. Yeah,
that's going to get an answer, unfortunately, out of the three of us, because I think we're kind of in unison and agreement. But no, I agree. It's a strange double standard in life.
I mean, I think. I mean, the big example will be the minstrel show is no longer on TV, whereas RuPaul's Drag Race is. So culturally, RuPaul's Drag Race is saying, yeah, it's okay, whereas the lack of any minstrel show and the public chastising you would get if you were to put on blackface is, evident that this is what, society has decided is what is correct and what is not correct.
Yeah, but we're still left with this problem that Schopenhauer has critiqued. And maybe a different way of approaching the same question is, to what extent are the whole drag queen phenomenon, to what extent is it fundamentally different to the simplistic caricatures that Schopenhauer espoused? And we go back to, people will criticize Schopenhauer, you will say, but he was of his time. And I'm just making the point, we have a mirror image, a similar phenomenon that often people fail to recognize because we are creatures of our own time.
Could it be because people don't really, they don't really do it, but most people don't really have the capacity to culturally critique a drag queen. They might just visually say, okay, it's a man dressed as a woman, but they're not necessarily looking at the underlying mannerisms which critique the way a woman acts or the way a woman is supposedly acting. They're just looking at the visual aspect. Oh, there's a man with lipstick on, blah blah blah, and that doesn't necessarily offend. But if you look at the hyper consumerism, the hyper bitchiness of the drag act that they all follow, is basically saying women are consumerists, women are bitchy, women are backstabbing. You know what I mean? So people are not critiquing that aspect; they're only critiquing the visual aspect of a drag queen.
Yeah, I find it difficult to distinguish in the sense that I find the whole thing, and this isn't about my feelings, I'm trying to make parallels and I'm trying to make comparisons that show that I'm not making this stuff up. There are links to be made.
Absolutely.
But I don't see what it has. So it might be my ignorance. I don't know enough about drag queen history to understand why it is such a specific aspect of gay culture. Because it has nothing to do with being gay as far as I can see. Yeah. Whether you dress as a woman
straight
or
men
not.
do it. Absolutely. There are straight men who dress up in drag.
But it's disproportionately a part of gay culture.
Of course, yeah. There's more gay men than
No, but you've just said, of course, that this is my lack of understanding. Why, of course? Why, as a gay man, does it help you in any shape or form to dress in woman face?
Is that a direct question to me?
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's kind of a historical thing. Like maybe it kind of allowed gay men in times gone by to be outed when it wasn't necessarily socially acceptable to out oneself.
Well,
I
then
don't know.
let's pursue the
don't know.
Schopenhauer thing as well. Schopenhauer's talking about women being able to, they're all allowed to do, in his eyes, that they're suited to look after children, so they can dance around. And the reason why they get on with children so well, according to Schopenhauer, is because they're big children themselves. That leads us into, because I'm refusing to give up on the whole drag queen thing, but drag queen story hour.
Let it die, Paul.
No, but it's the completely inappropriate hypersexualization. That's drag queens in general. But it's hypersexualization then being exposed, and I use the words advisedly, to young children who... Am I that? And I've seen YouTube videos where the parents encourage the kids to get up and dance, where there's these, male drag queen dancers with bloody dildos attached to them and all sorts. And you're thinking, in my perfect world, social services would be called in, and the child would be taken away from the parents. It's just so inappropriate.
Yeah, I don't understand any argument where you can kind of say that kids should be involved in that kind of thing, or it's like a kid-friendly thing. I just think it's
I think that sounds like an outlier to me, and I mean I have seen the clips myself, and as you probably understand by now, I'm quite liberal in that respect, but I would look at that and just think children being exposed to that culture and critiquing the fact that children are exposed to that culture isn't necessarily degrading or criticizing that culture. It's basically saying at what age do children need that explaining to them, if that makes any sense. Oh, look, daddy, look, mummy, why is that man dressed as a woman? You know what I mean? And it brings up questions of sexuality that at a very young age arguably children are not ready to understand. Which I think we can agree on.
This all, you might think I'm, bizarrely and pervertedly fascinated by the whole subject of drag queens, but this leaches into the whole trans thing, where you're saying that a 5-year-old child can decide what gender they are, when I would suggest they shouldn't even know what sexuality is until later on in life. The idea, basically, I think what I'm suggesting is innocence has completely been destroyed.
Yeah.
And where it still exists, there seems to be this weird pressure in society to extirpate it, get rid of it. And that is, I think, what I'm offended by, that the lack of just giving the kids a few precious years of innocence.
Yeah. No, I agree completely.
And I'm really intrigued as to why there is this pressure. There seems to be this urge, this need to extinguish the innocence. And I find that quite dark and disturbing.
Yeah. Well, I think the pressure is there in some pressure groups. Literally, there are some people who are pushing these ideologies. But again, sorry to be the pub bore. Just going back to the idea about media framing. This is Media Studies 101. Of course, the media are going to be pushing stories about trans activists. Wanting trans for all, to put it bluntly. Whereas I think the nuance is that most people will share the opinion, including probably a lot of trans activists themselves. Anecdotally, that there's probably an age where we need to talk about this. There's an age where we shouldn't really talk about this. So again, you would need quantitative studies to show this number of people believe kids should be taught about trans rights and trans activism and gay rights and stuff when they're 2 years old. You would need hard evidence to say that, but the media pushes that belief that's happening.
Well, we should move on, because I don't mean to hog this subject, but I just reject that last point you made, because there is evidence. I've seen pride marches where there's basically naked men in cowboy chaps. That's all they're wearing, and there's kids, their parents enthusiastically dancing along and encouraging the children. I didn't dream that up.
No, absolutely. I've seen that as well, and I agree with that. But my point is, are those outlying cases? Is that like the one in 1,000?
A public pride march, by definition, isn't an outlier. It's a public event.
Yeah.
So this is my point.
I get your point. Yeah, I get your point.
These are public libraries that drag queen story hour is happening in.
Yeah.
I'm all about
promoting that. It wouldn't be about. I wouldn't be in favor of advertising heterosexuality to kids either.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's it.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point, Dose.
I was very clear. I said I'm in favor of children being innocent for as long as possible.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean, and I think that might be a good time to just move on from there. Just say don't sexualize 100% kids whatsoever. Like there's just no need for it.
Yeah.
Where are we?
to go to the chat.
Yeah, check the chat. I'm just looking through my notes because I had a few. I think we've covered most of it, but...
Well, another great example of great writing that you now need to defend. The beginning of section 369, the undersized, narrow-shouldered, wide-hipped, and short-legged sex, my ideal woman, could only be called the first sex by a male intellect clouded by its sexual drive. Its entire beauty resides in this drive.
This part here, Paul.
Yeah, I'm not sure why women necessarily have to have short legs.
Yeah, but I think
saying the shorter than men. To be taller, maybe, I don't know.
I don't think you could justify this, but you could point to the historical aspect of this. I mean, I guess when Schopenhauer was writing this, there wasn't women walking around in hot pants and, you know, fake boobs hanging out and big, you know, trout pout Botox lips and stuff like that. So women then weren't hypersexualized. So I mean, maybe he's here wishing that they were. I don't know. Or maybe the ladies in his village weren't particularly good looking. I don't know. He might lived in Hobbiton or the Shire.
It's like Ken Dodd wrote that bit.
Yeah.
The Knotty Ash Manifesto for Women's Rights.
Yeah. But I mean, this might be Schopenhauer kind of, you know, claiming bisexuality or just saying, "Oh, I've had enough of women and I prefer the stronger sex." I don't know. It's a strange passage.
And then he goes on, you see, I think one slight problem with your argument that Schopenhauer didn't really mean all this is he goes on, after insulting their physical appearance, basically saying that if the Greeks really did not allow women into the theatre, then they were justified. At least people would have been able to hear something in their theatres. And I am someone who actually got in an argument in it was a piano recital at Manchester Bridgewater Hall, and I finally lost my patience and shouted at two women, "Will you two shut up?" Just as the pianist had finished a little bit. And because I don't know if you're familiar with the Bridgewater Hall, the acoustics are absolutely exceptional.
Right.
So all you heard was my big loud gob. "Will you shut up?"
Yo, shut.
About 600 heads swiveling to glare at me.
You got a job as an usher there. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what there is to justify or negate here. It's kind of, yeah, it's almost like a throwaway comment. Just, yeah, women are chatty. I mean, this is one of those stereotypes that comes up today. It's almost like a universal critique that some men have about women.
The only thing I could just compare it to is a football. And yeah.
What's football got to do with anything?
Well, women at football. It is a little bit strange. I'm not saying women shouldn't be at the football, but it is a bit strange when you've got a big bunch of burly blokes swearing like anything, and then behind that you've got like a cackle of women going, "Come on!" It's just weird.
But that doesn't this link back to Paul? Doesn't this link to your point at the start? And when we talk about the manosphere, is a reaction to the lack of male spaces, perhaps, is in the sense that football was always a male space. I mean, even when I was growing up in the 80s and early 90s, it was only when the Premier League got in full swing and the whole season ticket thing and the cost went up and football hooliganism was on the decline, and there was this kind of rebranding of football as a family thing. But when I came into the world, so to speak, for a considerable part of my early upbringing, it was like football was a man's thing only. It was only for men. You didn't see women go to football very rarely, and that was the male space.
Because I was going, well before you, and it was. I remember there was a semi-final of the FA Cup at Goodison. Liverpool played Man United, and I was walking down an alley with my dad, and all the United fans were coming towards us, and it was not going to end well. And mounted policemen came to our rescue. And
Yeah.
the violence in those days was darts
Oh,
being
yeah.
thrown, coins being thrown.
Nasty
And
business.
I'm not
yeah.
saying I'm nostalgic for it, but there was what your point about raw masculinity, and then there's the question:
Yeah.
when those spaces for raw aggression and violence get taken away, you don't have to be a massive Freudian to think what's repressed reappears elsewhere.
No, absolutely.
And I think that would be one of the explanations of this festering manosphere, the lack of outlets for anger.
Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite novels of all time is, I mean, I absolutely adore Aldous Huxley. I have everything he's ever written. He's one of my biggest inspirations. And the final novel he wrote, Island, was his treatise on, in a novel form, a treatise on utopia. And he identified this problem as something that's always stuck with me. You're growing up in the northeast of England when I was a kid, you know, men were violent. And his solution was that he understood that there are certain men who are physical, strong men are physical, and they need physical jobs to do. So trying to lump everyone into the same kind of mold is never going to result in a happy society. So men who are physically strong were given jobs involving something physical to do, and that kept away their violent tendencies. And they also had sports and boxing and things like that. So there was no pigeonholing people who were physical and needed that violence and needed that you know, show of strength. There was no pigeonholing them into, oh no, now you need to act like this, you know, in an unnatural way that the body resents. And that always kind of stuck with me, that, you know, you would see that every day. You know, this kind of the repressed violent male. They weren't allowed to be violent. They weren't allowed to be aggressive or physical during the day, but it all came out at night in the pub, especially when they had a drink or it comes out of the football.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is as well is that, you know, it kind of goes underground, like you say. It manifests elsewhere, doesn't it? And I think that there is a clear lack of just male only spaces. I mean, my granddad had the working man's club. There's nothing.
Yeah, they're few and far between now. There's still a couple in my hometown, but you go in and there's not many members. You just get a couple of barflies in there, but I mean, it's quite an experience to go in.
Yeah.
Because I remember going in the 80s. Go ahead, Paul.
You two are like two old women over a garden fence. Not to be misogynistic about it, but so I'm moving on in a masculine manner.
Come on, let's get some masculinity.
He's quoting somebody else. He's quoting Huarte in his examination of men's wits. But he said, women on account of the coldness and wetness of their sex, quite sure what that means, cannot attain to profound intellect. We can only see that they speak with a certain appearance of expertise on trivial and facile things. And he's quoting that with approval. Stuart, who says that he's not got it in
I'm trying to find that quote. Must be quite different in this version.
When I read that bit, the thing that sprang to mind was imposter syndrome, because I've worked with a load of women, you know, in various different industries and businesses and stuff, and they've all kind of said to me that they have at some point felt imposter syndrome, and I have to admit I never have. I've always thought, you know, back in the TV days and things like that I'd earned my spot. You know, like I'd studied and then worked as hard as I could to get where I got, and yet there are women that are far more educated and sometimes far more experienced than me, and they feel this imposter syndrome. So I don't know what if that lends itself to this portion or not. I don't know.
One thing before I forget, in the sense that, you know, people nowadays are so anti Schopenhauer's view on women. One little factoid. Simone de Beauvoir, who famously wrote the book The Second Sex, they can't prove it, but it is interesting. I'm reading here, they are the inferior sex, the second sex that lags behind in every respect. And it's well documented that Simone de Beauvoir was a massive Schopenhauer fan.
Yeah.
So it would be funny if one of the single most important feminist treatises was written A, by a Schopenhauer fan, and B, derived its title from one of the most misogynistic essays ever written, but not if you listen to Stuart.
Well, I mean, I think this comes down to the fact that you can appreciate elements of a theory. I mean, you don't need to fully agree with the person, and you don't need to fully agree with the whole corpus of the theory. I mean, you can read Schopenhauer, Treatise on Will and Representation, without reading this essay, and you would be none the
That's what
wiser.
actually I was going to ask you. You headed me off at the pass, but what do you gain from reading this in terms of his overall project that you wouldn't gain just from reading Willer's Representation?
Nothing. I mean, I personally see this as it's very similar to Heidegger's Black Notebooks when he's ranting on about, you know, Jewish world conspiracies and things like that. It's like you gain an insight into the individual, but then I think it's a big leap to do that the whole Emmanuel Fay treatment and say, okay, because Heidegger wrote this passage, therefore I'm going to read anti-Semitism into his entire, you know, corpus of tens of thousands of pages of philosophy. I think to read this and then say, oh no, I hate Schopenhauer is just petulant and it's silly.
Could I make another point that actually is more directly relevant to this, in the sense that not only, it just strikes me that women will only be truly equal when offensive essays like this can be taken in good spirit. There is a certain irony that the minute you defend women from having to read stuff like this, or the minute you expect women to be too sensitive to find some humor in this, you're treating them with kid gloves, which perversely reinforces some of Schopenhauer's more misogynistic interpretations.
No, fully agreed. Yeah.
Absolutely. There is a certain irony that people always seem to miss this, that if you want genuine equality, you have to take the good with the bad. If you want genuine equality, you need to be treated like everybody else. Which again, it's this mind virus of weaponized kindness, whereby everyone has to be so tolerant and kind. But everyone's familiar with examples where this pathological kindness actually becomes quite nasty. And it's not really kind at all.
No.
And that did strike me about the whole essay. I've read stuff 10, 20 years ago, feminist writings that were vehemently misandrist, anti-male. And because I'm a man and I don't feel oppressed, it was like, oh, well, she's got a bit of a problem. But I'm not clutching my pearls. I'm not, you know, being absolutely mortified. If women want to genuinely be fully assertive, fully independent, fully autonomous people, they should be able to read an essay like this without having an attack of the vapors.
Exactly.
No, I agree. I agree.
So us three men agree that's what women should do.
Yeah.
But I would argue it would be interesting to know, like, who is getting offended with this, and I know there are people who get offended this. I know, especially in academia, you know, people write off Schopenhauer, like people write off Heidegger nowadays.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, Stuart, you saw me try to give talks at university just about Heidegger, and that was, you know, unbelievably offensive to some people.
Yeah, let's not name any names, but yeah, I remember. Oh, it's crazy, but they would be the same academics that would then go on to write a treatise on why men are the devil incarnate. That's the thing. So they would be doing exactly what they're taking offense in another academic doing. So yeah, that's it. That's academia for you.
Yes. Right. I don't think I've got anything else to say. I just love some of his phrasing. In the upper classes, they vegetate as useless old spinsters. Or become prostitutes who lead a life that is joyless as it is dishonourable.
Yeah.
But who become essential under such circumstances for the satisfaction of the male sex. That's when he's talking about prostitution.
That's right, yeah. But
it's your point, Stuart. He does make the serious point about what else are they but women who've been shortchanged in the most terrible manner by the monogamous tradition.
Yep.
Genuine human sacrifices on the altar of monogamy.
That's it.
It's beautiful phrasing, and in that sense, that's very pro-women.
No, that's my argument. Thanks for finally in a roundabout way supporting it.
Yeah, but that's one little snippet in an absolute tirade of misogynistic abuse and random insults about tiny little legs.
But
Yeah,
it's
I didn't get what you.
it's the destination that matters, not the journey.
True, very true.
I'm fascinated in those days because also women have maybe body shapes have changed, but I'm just
Yeah.
fascinated by Schopenhauer's dislike of little stubby legs.
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting. I mean, interesting to go back in time and see what the reality was. I mean, I think with period dramas nowadays, we have this image of it being a kind of very glamorous, very sexy time. But I think if you went back to Schopenhauer's time, I think everyone would be a bit grubby and grotty and stumpy legged. Yeah,
Sounds fit.
Right.
Cool.
Scrofula.
Hey, whoa, give me some of that.
Dirty.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, though that was quite nice.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, we got him to smile. Got the grumpy sod to smile in the end.
He's been very grumpy tonight, Paul, wasn't he?
I love it. I love it when Paul's grumpy. He's like a grumpy little gnome.
Yeah.
He's like Bad Santa.
I'm going after we've done this. I'm going off to pick at a drag queen bar.
Oh
enough.
no. You're inside the drag queen bar. You're just gonna stay outside.
Oh, well, I've got to go in and drink. Eventually, I'll probably perform. That'd be the one way to shut it down. Me performing drag would ruin it for everyone.
Paulina. Oh no, terrible.
I've got the legs for it,
sorry,
though.
folks.
Seriously, I've got the legs for it. I could really carry that off.
Are they short?
I've got very shapely ex-footballers' legs.
Oh.
So not stumpy.
I'd have to shave them.
Short.
Otherwise,
You have to wax them. You have to go to the wax place and sack back and crack. Is it called?
Yeah, I saw a comedian who did a very funny sketch on some bloke. He took up jogging, and some bloke was saying, if you shave your legs, you'll go quicker.
Yeah.
And he said, well, surely, how long does it take you to shave your legs? Because you've lost all that time. And then he said, what if you shaved your arms? Wouldn't that allow you to shave your legs quicker?
That's a fair point.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, that was really good.
I like it. Yeah, I like
right. You and I are meeting next Thursday, aren't we, Stuart?
It's next Thursday. Yeah, we're going to do Proust again next Thursday.
Episode 6 of Proust.
Oh, I've lost track. We're making track now, but I've lost track. I think it's 6. Yeah, episode 6.
We're just getting to the bit of the famous Madeleine episode.
We're there. Yeah, we're going to do it next week.
We're definitely doing it next week, and after that, we'll be then starting on the second bit of Combray. So we actually are making remarkable. And what shocks me is the numbers have stayed pretty constant.
Yeah, I think we've got an audience. But I mean, unless it's all bots, maybe it's like bots, AI bots scraping.
Well, I was fully expecting that we'd manage to decimate the audience much quicker than we've managed.
Yeah, no, it's good. We've got a hardcore of following hanging on.
Yeah. Anyway, so thanks everyone. I found out I have a weird annoyance with drag queens.
Cool.
Leave that there.
I'm leaving it out there. I think I would try and perform drag in the character of Samuel Beckett. So what would be a good drag name for Samuel Beckett lookalike? Samantha Bucket.
Yeah. Wilhelmina Crap.
That doesn't sound anything like Samuel Beckett.
Yeah, but it's waiting for crap. It's a mix of waiting for Goddard and Crap's last tape.
Are you able to think of any drag names without starting with Wilhelmina?
No.
All your drag names involve Wilhelmina.
Well.
Anyway, Stuart's boring me now. So we'll bring this to an end.
We'll end it. Yeah, that's it. We're all tired.
Till the next time, we'll find something vaguely provocative to talk about next time. Till the next time, all the very best. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining in.
Bye.